The HAIS mission is to promote cultural understanding of the Hmong culture on the CSB SGU campus and to build a community across all cultural contexts. Tonight we have Kao Kalia Yang joining us for our third Hmong Month event. Kao Kalia is a teacher, public speaker, and writer. She is the author of the award-winning book, Latehomecomer, a Hmong Family Memoir, and her forthcoming book, The Song Poet, which will be coming out in May. She is a graduate of Carleton College and Columbia University's School of the Arts. Tonight she is here to talk about The Latehomecomer, which is a memoir about her and her family's experience in the jungles of Laos, the camps in Thailand, and their journey to the United States. Please help me give a warm welcome to Kao Kalia.
Hi, thank you so much for coming out. I'm going to start out with the reading and then I'll step a little bit from the shadows so we can actually talk to each other. I'm here for all of you and I want to give you an opportunity to speak with me. Because the thing that I don't want is for any of you to go out of here and to walk out of here and say, that was an incredibly boring talk. I got nothing from that, okay? So I'm going to throw the ball into your court. It's up to you to ask me interesting questions so we can have an interesting hour together. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, you guys agree? So now we begin. Now, you've been hearing a lot about refugees in the news, especially with what's happening in Syria. And on Facebook, we see sad images like little boys washed up on the beaches. It's been tearing my heart because I'm a refugee, because so much of the Hmong experience is that of coming from so far, looking for a home, looking to belong. A few months ago, my husband woke me up in the dark. We have 5-month-old identical twin boys. We don't get much sleep. I don't like getting waken up in the dark. But he woke me up, and I'm like, what? And then I looked, and he had tears in his eyes. It was when all this conversation was happening, and the question was, should we say yes or should we say no? And so many politicians are saying no more immigrants, no more refugees. And Aaron looked at me, he said, you wouldn't be here if we had said no. Our children wouldn't be in our lives. And I think that's really the thing that compels me to be here, to demand at each and every talk that I'm an American and that we belong because we belong to each other. And so I'm going to start with a reading about that, about the plight of the refugees. And really because yesterday was Valentine's Day. And my mom and my dad don't really celebrate Valentine's Day, but they are the greatest love story that I know. And so what I found in my own marriage, my husband is here, he drove me here, is that you don't know what's coming to you. He didn't know that 5 months ago I would die and come back to life. We didn't know that we would have twins, Of course, I'm a small human being, but we didn't expect me to die in the process. But I really did. In the delivery room after my second boy was born, I looked at the clock and I saw the hands of time stop just a little bit. And I said to my nurse, I said, am I going to die? She looked at me and she said, no, you're not going to die. Everything is going to be fine. The hardest part is already done. They wheeled me out of the OR. My mother puts her hand to my heart and my heart stops beating. Even after the heart stops beating, the brain remembers. I have this image of my mother imprinted into my lids. But my mom, I hear that they had to tear her away from me, that a doctor tore me away from her, that they had to do chest compressions to call me back to life, that they put an IV into my heart, they cut up my neck and put an IV directly into my heart. And in all of this, Aaron was there, and I don't think he ever thought of me. In all of the journey, we never thought that 4 years into our marriage that we would be faced with that question. And so love is so much about what you don't expect coming to you, coming to each other, and standing through it all. So I begin with a reading from my mom and dad's love story when they became refugees. It's from the Latehomecomer. So this is May of 1979. My family has just crossed the Mekong River. They're in Thailand and they're waiting to be picked up. The group sat under the rustling bamboo leaves for a few hours in silence. Everybody's hearts were tired. The eyelids of children were closing with exhaustion. They did not sleep, but they rested against each other, very still. When the smaller ones began whimpering, the women said the children needed food. So the men got up, saying there was little they could do sitting along the banks of the river. The family would walk into Thailand a little and see if there was food to be found. And later, when they could, they would find a way to help my Uncle Ju's family escape. Uncle Ang had to lift my grandma off the ground. She leaned on him as they walked away from the expanse of the Mekong River. And Laos, a land that they loved, the land holding their brother, the land holding the grave of their father. The tattered group's 6 brothers, no longer 7 because Uncle Ju was gone, and their wives and children and their mother did not make it far into Thailand before they were spotted by farmers. Refugees had been streaming into Thailand for the past 4 years since the Americans had left Laos and the Laotian government had started killing the Hmong people. The village chief had been notified that a new group had entered into the country, and he had sent word to the Thai soldiers. Men with guns waited for the group at the end of a dirt road. The farmers stood in place to watch the shivering group make their way toward the men in uniforms. A farmer on the road threw an old black t-shirt and a pair of tattered shorts at my father. The shirt hit him on the arm. The shorts fell to the ground in front of him. My father picked up the clothes and did not know whether to say thank you or not to the silent man who looked at him with unblinking eyes. My mother stopped her slow walking and waited for my father to put on the shirt and shorts. She loved him very much in that moment. She wanted to protect him from the life around them, but her baby held her back. I never thought I would see clothes thrown at my husband, she says, looking at the floor as if all the years had not erased the memory. When he picked up the clothes off the ground and tried to wipe the dirt away, I could not look. My mother could only wrap her arms more securely around Doug. Her long hair fell about her shoulders. There was nothing to tie it back with. The wind blew the long strands into her face. Her hair had dried since the crossing. She was a proud young woman. I wonder if she hid behind the curtain of her hair and sought comfort in the small, unmoving baby with the fluttering lids. The Thai soldiers spoke to them in Laotian. They were informed that there was a place for incoming refugees to register with a group called the United Nations. After their registration, they would be sent to a fenced compound where they would stay until further arrangements could be made. They were told that they were in Nong Khai, a Thai province, but that the refugee camp there was full. The soldiers told them that they were refugees now, a Payok, people fleeing for a home. Like times before, they were told to follow the men with the guns. It was not such a long walk, but the farmers on the road stared at them, and every step felt stiff and hard. Maybe it was an hour, maybe it was less than that. They had no watches, and they were too tired to count the ticking of time, too embarrassed in their rags with their hunger and their children, with bones jutting from thin shoulders. An expression on one man's face is the memory that my mother and father both carry, even 25 years after the fact. It was only a look, but it said that we were not humans, too poor to walk on the earth. It was in that image of that Thai man with his red and white turban wrapped around his head, looking at them making their way into his country, that my mother and father learned what it meant to be poor, to be without a home or clothing to hide in. The soldiers led them to a house my mother remembers as beautiful. It was wooden and it was on stilts, and the roof rose to the sky, and there were stairs that led from the ground to its patio. I wished, even then, to see the inside, but we could not go in. The Thai soldiers told them to wait outside. The group sat admiring the house, not saying very much, wondering what was going to happen. They were surprised when the soldiers returned with plates of rice and dried fish. It was only a little food, and the adults could not eat away the hunger, but they nibbled a little as the children ate. They watched as the children, with their small, hurried, dirty hands, put pieces of fish and rice into their open mouths. Like little birds, many of them just swallowed the food. After the plates were empty, they noticed a bus waiting for them. The soldiers told them to get in. They would go to the UN compound to register as refugees of war. When they reached the compound, they noticed the wire fence as tall as 2 men standing on each other's shoulders. They were told to get out of the bus and enter the gates. My family hesitated before the entrance. They had escaped from one country and had expected to be captives in the next. My father's feet stilled. A Thai soldier punched him and he fell to the ground. The man kicked him. My father got up as fast as he could. not to hit the man back, but because he did not want my mother and my grandmother to see him on the ground. My father looked at the man and he did nothing. He would tell me years later, "My heart hurt more than my body. The flesh can take the blows, the heart suffers them." It was the first time I felt that there would be no other place like Bukau, the village where I was born. The soldier who hit me was an older man. I was like a prisoner. I stood still, and then I walked into the place they would keep me. And I kept thinking, I was a man too. I had a wife and a child, but it didn't matter because we had no home anymore. That was how my mom and dad entered Thailand. I'm going to read a little bit from my new book, The Song Poet, and this is going to be at the beginning of our years in America. It's from track 4, titled Love Song. So this is right when they got to America, in those first few years. I loved you on the plane to America when your new shirt from Thailand began soaking up the blood of our youngest, Kalia. She leaned into you on the seat across the handrest that separated you two. Her head rested against her side, the tail of your shirt clutched in her hand as she wiped at the blood that dribbled from her nose. I took her from you so you could rest. In my arms, her eyes grew heavy with sleep. The red on your shirt dried to the color of rust, and in the dark chamber of her flight across the heavens, I watched your fingers scratch at the dried blood, trying futilely to remove the stain. I watched you hide the stain in the folds of your finger. I loved you when we stood on the bridge overlooking Highway 94 side by side in our American clothes. We wore jeans from the thrift store. We had on sweaters whose leaves bunched at our wrists. The church basement jackets were too big and too long. We stood without words looking at the cars that rushed below on the fast highway. The sky was a layering of dark clouds. The rain drizzled lightly. Half the streets that rose high from the walls on either side of the highway were bare without leaves, arms reaching hungrily toward the gray. The other half carried brightly colored leaves in yellow, orange, crispy brown, shades of pink, some of them still clinging to the last of the summer green. All a sharp contrast against the day. A brisk breeze blew. We had no words for each other or our new lives. You kept both your hands in your pockets. Strands of your long hair flew across your face. And I knew you would cut it soon. And I could not ask you to stand young beside me for longer than I could stand young beside you. We knew we would age in America. I loved you when you asked me, when are we going to get a washing machine now that we are in America? I hadn't expected the question. We'd walked through Sears and I had seen you touch the tops of the washing machines with their matching dryers. I had seen you flip price tags and look at numbers. I hadn't expected you to ask that question in the car. The children were loud. They grew quiet. I tried to focus on the road, but everything was blurry for a moment. My throat grew tight. Words were hard. All I could do was swallow my hurt and my pride and tell you what you already knew to be true. I'm sorry I cannot get you a washing machine, even now that we are in America. I loved you when you were pregnant with our little boy, Sue. Your stomach hadn't been growing much. You had been bleeding. You felt pain. I couldn't believe we would have a baby, and I chose not to believe it even after the ultrasound. I loved you when you gave birth to Sue. I couldn't believe he would be in our life until the moment he cried up at me, his head all bruised from the vacuum, his little face suffused with purple. His hands were in fists and he punched up at my unbelieving eyes. He was angry because I had not dared to accept him as part of my reality. He was angry because the journey to us was so long. The look in his brown eyes, so fierce and focused, worried me. For the first time, I wondered if I could be a good father to a son. I felt my own reservation and fear in the wrestling of his fists against my hold, the soft fragility of fingers I wanted to fold into my own. I looked at you, exhausted, hair mussed, eyes closed, sinking into the hospital's pillows, and I knew you would leave this for me to figure out, my son and my relationship. Leave it to our own making. Your trust in me then and now scares and reassures me. I loved you all those years. We worked every hour we could to feed our children and clothe them, and the young ones kept on coming, and our hearts were full of love, but our heads hurt, trying to work around the budgets that never balanced. I loved you on the cold dawns when we dropped off the younger children at my brother Drew's house. We scurried in the dark up their icy walkway, tinker with the lock, all in the shadows of night. We set the children down and took off their jackets and snowsuits. We turned on the television set and placed them in front of the flickering screen. We propped bottles nearby. We watched Sue hold Lou as Lou sat close to sleeping Shell as they waited for their cousins to awaken into the day, for their aunt and their uncle to gather them close in the morning light. Each day you whispered to the children that it was your last day of work, of leaving them. I had to nudge your arm to get you to move. I had to be the one to open and close the old brown door. I had to watch as the Minnesota cold stung your eyes and its icy wind bit into your face as you tried not to cry for the 3 little ones and yourself. Each and every day, those long years through, feeling but unable to do a thing to alleviate or help the sorrow that grew and grew inside of you. For all the time you could not give to the children, the gift you could not give yourself, my love for you grew. I loved you when you said that we couldn't get up at 3 in the morning anymore to go to work away from our youngest children, and you wanted me to change jobs, to get work that would allow me to take care of the children during the day. I wanted to tell you that we were assemblers who do not speak much English in this country. I wanted to tell you, to ask you who would drive you to work in the mornings and back home again when the shift was through. We only had 1 car. You were afraid of cars. I wanted to tell you that I was scared to go looking for a job and come home without one. I wanted to tell you that I was scared to go to work without you in the same place with me. Who was going to help you move the heavy boxes of machine parts to the stacks when you filled the boxes up? What if something went wrong in the factory? Who would hold your hand and run with you outside? How would I ever work in this country, raise the children without knowing that you were beside me? You were the only reason I felt we had a chance going forward as a family, and you were asking us to part our days for our children. I loved them too much to speak of my fears, so I said I would look for a job, even at a lesser pay, on a different shift, so that I could take care of the children, and we wouldn't have to part with them each morning for work before the light of the sun could comfort them from the dark. I loved you through all the years when we couldn't be together because you worked different shifts in different places. Each day you continued your old routine. You woke up at 3 in the morning, you brushed your teeth, cooked food, and then dressed. You pulled the front door behind you and the key turned in the lock by 4. By 5, you were at Phillips and Tumro Industries in Eden Prairie. I took care of the children until you got home at 2 in the afternoon. My shift at the new company started at 3. We had the minutes in between to say hello and goodbye. I didn't get home until midnight. The only light in the house that was on each night I came home was in the kitchen. The small, moldy house was fogged up by winter and our efforts to stay warm. The house was quiet because you and the younger children were already asleep. The older girls looked up from their homework at the small dining table, called out their greetings, made an effort to get up and come give me hugs. But I always thought about their safety first. I always told them not to come close. I was working as a polisher in a machine factory. I didn't want the residue of chemicals and the steel particles I worked with to get on them. I knew that it could cause cancer. I said, after I shower, I'll give you hugs. Each night I showered and then I kissed my older girls good night. And then I made my way to our room where I clung to the edge of our mattress, the 3 younger ones in between us. They're even breathing my song in the night. Rest never came until you woke up at 3 again and I could scoot the children over closer to the vacant place by the wall and sleep on my back. In those years, it was only in my dreams that we were together. There you reached out to me and you held my hand across the heads of our children. There you spoke softly and asked me how I was doing with my new work. There you held me close and told me that I was doing a good job right alongside you. But our life wasn't like my dreams. I never asked you what your dreams were. I was scared of them as you were of mine. On the weekends we were shy and angry, tired and exhausted, too happy only to be with the children. unsure of how to be with each other, our voices colliding, crashing, silencing, pleading on the weekends when we share the same house, the same children, the same life. That is the greatest love story that I know. So yes, I am Kao Kalia Yang. I'm a Hmong American writer. Every time I write, I put a piece of my heart on the page. To give anything less would be to cheat all of you, all of my readers. That's why we read, to discover ourselves in the world that we belong to find the things that we didn't know to be true. So that's who I am, and I'm here today for you. In a long line of Hmong people to talk about the Hmong American experience, right? Because I'm a writer, because I live and I breathe in the arts, I know that every writer, every artist, that we seek to wrap our hands and wrap our hearts around all of humanity. That the pulse of the Hmong heart is not so different than your own, no matter who you are or where you come from. Because I'm a refugee, I know that all of us have come a long ways looking for each other, looking to belong. So I'm here for you, to offer you my thoughts, not guaranteed answers because I'm not good at that, but to think about the things that matter to you. You ventured here from your nights full of books and homework that needs to be done. So let's make this worth your while. Talk to me. I'll do my best. Plus, you all agreed. Yes.
What motivated you to become a writer?
You know, when we first came to America, we lived in the McDonough housing project. We didn't have a library, but a bookmobile would come up to the rec center, and my sister used to hold my hands, and we used to go because we didn't have a VCR. And so we would check out books, and then she would tell me stories. She was my human VCR. You know, we didn't have much of anything, but she would tell me these elaborate stories, elaborate movies, you know, from the books that we got. And one day I remember whispering to the librarian, is there a book about a kid like me? And she gave me a book about the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Vietnamese. But there were no Hmong books. And she remembers, because she's still around, and Doug remembers me saying, one day some little girl is going to find a story about the people in her life, about her mom and her dad, on that bookshelf right there. I never thought I would be the writer to put that story on the shelf. But it was 2003, and the most well-known book was Ann Fadiman's The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. And when I read that book, Ann Fadiman said, Hmong people do one of two things in moments of danger. We flee or we fight. There is no in between. I know how long we lived in the refugee camps in Thailand. The in-between was for us 8 years, for others 10, 20 years. And I thought there was room for a Hmong voice to enter that story. And so it was a combination, right, of the fact that there weren't any and the fact that Ann Fadiman had written this phenomenally moving, beautiful book. But I had a response to a question that she asserted, to a reality that she thought was true. And so my grandma died, and I loved my grandma. My grandma paperwork said she was 93. She said she was over 100. But I was about to graduate from Carleton College, and one of my dreams was always to walk with her at graduation. My grandma never walked the college campus with me. She was always too scared of the other people around us. She thought that it was so educated, that it was so big. But on my graduation, I wanted her to be there. But my grandma fell in Brooklyn Center in December of that year. And I went to her and I said, Grandma, get up. And she said, Minai, would you show that I'm not going to get up? She said that there were people who loved her before me, that a long time ago she had a mom and a dad and brothers and sisters. And that while there is no Hmong land in the map of a bigger world, one day she would climb the Hmong mountain in her heart, open that door, and dinner would be ready, and everybody would be there, and they would say, where have you been? We waited so long. Why are you so late in coming home? That's the title, right? The Latehomecomer. Right? Why are you so late in coming home? My grandma never learned how to read or write. She never been in a classroom. You know, the stories in the libraries were not the stories from her life. When she died, she left us all behind. And I wanted the world to know that she had lived. And so I started writing this long love letter to my grandma. And it became a book because my dad said, when you dream in the right direction, you never wake up, the dream never dies, it always only grows bigger. And so a young writer came. And when I read this book about the secret war in Laos that had killed 2/3 of my people, there are people who are calling it fiction. There are people who wanted to know where I got the research from, and so they invited me to all these schools, all these places to talk and to speak from the Hmong American experience. And I did that for 3 years. That's all I did, over 365 talks a year. And then my heart was burning because I knew it was time for another one, because I was carrying this story inside of me. And I met Aaron Hokinson, my husband, and he said, you can't talk anymore, you have to write. And so we wrote the second book, and it's going to come out in May. I get asked all the time, if there's something else in the world that you could be, what would it be? I get asked all the time, why are you a writer? For the second question, I have a different answer every day. That's why I know I stand a chance of being a good writer. Because the Latehomecomer now is incredibly widely taught. Because so many of you can pick up a book about the stories of your lives. That's why I'm a writer. That's why I write. That's why I am. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, right here.
In one of your TEDx talks, you mentioned that you were selected to read. Can you talk about how you found your voice?
Good one. So when I was 7, my mom and I went to Kmart, and my mom, who was much younger than I am today, and I thought an incredibly beautiful and brave woman, pointed to the ceiling, and she said, I'm looking for the thing that makes the world shine. She was looking for light bulbs, but she didn't have the word. But my mom speaks with an accent, and so the clerk started doing this. And then the more she did it, the more agitated my mom became, so the harder she struggled. And then finally the clerk just got annoyed and walked away. And my mom and I stood there waiting for her to come back to tell us where the light bulbs were, but she never did. And I decided that if the world we lived in did not need to hear my mom and my dad, then it did not need to hear me. So the next day I stopped talking. You know, and then when you never talk, and then when the teacher says, Kao Kalia Yang, or you hear, you whisper, here. The here is so rusty that other children look. So my voice died inside of me. What started as a rebellion died inside of me, crushed against my being. And so I stopped talking. But, you know, I went to the St. Paul Public Schools. I had some good teachers and some not so good teachers, but enough good ones that I got into Carleton College. At Carleton, I didn't talk either, but one of my professors said, you know, it's selfish just to absorb knowledge. That one day you have to be a creator of knowledge. He made me feel bad for not talking. You know? So I would then whisper whenever I had any ideas, I would whisper it. But then I went to Columbia to become a writer. And to be a writer, you have to read. You know? And I never talked at a UN conference. One of my first readings was at a UN conference. And all these people stood up and they said, that's my story too. You know, people from Africa, people from Eastern Europe, people, you know, from Canada stood up and they said, that's my story too. And so I discovered in that moment, I think that there was something that called. When you're doing something, when you're writing well, there's a power there that reaches across people and across experience. But it was still very hard. I came back here to publish my book, and on the night of my book launch, April 2008, first time I really stood up to publicly talk. I couldn't do it. Stood up, got read, sat down, stood up again, got read, sat down, and my dad, he got up from the back of the audience. You know, my older sister, Doe, when she was in 3rd grade, she won the North End Elementary School spelling bee, and she won $50. And she bought our father this pair of shoes that fit him. It was the first pair of shoes that fit him, because we just gotten him from the church basements before that. So that when he went to conferences with us, he always dressed up, but when he walked, his shoes would slap against the ground because he was always embarrassed. And it made me feel horrible because I wanted to buy him something too, but I couldn't. But the semester I graduated from Columbia, I had $500 left of fellowship money. I'm a little bit competitive with her, so I thought I'd buy him something more expensive. So I visited the brooksbrother.com website and I found this jacket. So I got it from my dad. But my dad's a machinist, he didn't have opportunities to wear nice clothing. But on the night of my book launch, he wore it, So my father got up in this jacket that I had gotten him, He walked toward me, and he put out his hand. My hands are shaking. And he put out his, and I put my hands on it. My father is a machinist. He uses his flesh to cut and to steel. Human flesh suffered incredibly rough hands. And he says, from hardness you can give birth to gentleness. I have the gentle hands of a writer, And my dad said, if tears can be incarnate, we would rain the world with our sorrow. But because they cannot, the Hmong tears can only drain the mountains of India. But that if I spoke up, the winds of humanity blew, then maybe our lives were not lost. That was the first time I spoke. I couldn't let him down. Not in that jacket, not in that moment. I can't let him down still. He calls me, he says, how'd it go? All the time, still. My father calls me and says, how'd it go? I don't want to tell him that I was not brave enough to speak. My voice is soft, away from the power of a microphone. You can't hear me. How many of us in one lifetime get the power of the microphone in our hands to speak to the truth of our experiences and assert that our lives matter? It's a powerful gift. I cannot waste it. So I find my voice every time. I have to find it every time because it's not my natural state of being. Is anybody going to say this is boring? Now is your time. Now is your time. Now is always your time. Yes, right here.
You made such a huge impact for the Hmong community that throughout your whole career, what is the most rewarding for you?
Good question. My career, so the book was published in 2008. It's 2015. It's been a while, When I think about my career, I think about myself as a writer, as a public speaker, and then as a teacher. What has been most rewarding for me? It's a good question. I think in the gift of teaching, I'm always reminded of where I began. This year, I'm stationed at North Hennepin Community College, and I'm teaching a lot of Hmong folk and a lot of other folk who are new to English, or a lot of English-speaking individuals who don't feel comfortable with English on the written page. When I write, when I speak, it's different, but when I write, I have the key to the door. I open. I'm not a guest. I'm not knocking for you to let me in. I'm not ringing the bell waiting for you to open that door. I can come in, I can take off my shoes or not. Whatever personality I want to put on the page, I feel comfortable, right? To be able to do that for younger people and make them believe is very powerful work. It's emotionally exhausting because I have to inspire them every time. Inspire them, tell them that their lives matter, tell them that the accents they speak with, that those belong on the page too. They don't always have to be afraid of the red pen. That is rewarding work when it works, right? When it works. Publicly speaking, I'll tell you about one of the hardest experiences I had. It was in Wisconsin. It was in a high school. There was over 850 young people in the room. And I've been there for a week to open and then close their Global Awareness Week. And I thought I'd done a good job. I worked so hard that week. This is early on in my career. So for $1,000, they bought me a ticket to Wisconsin. I got up at 7 to do the keynote, and every single day, every single class period, I was teaching. Okay, that's public speaking, 8, 9 times a day? And then they had me do that for 5 days, and I'd given it everything I'd gotten. And I gave this final closing talk, and I spoke Hmong because one Hmong girl in the back of the audience raised her hand, and she said, why didn't you write the book in Hmong so I could read it too? Because she was a newcomer to English. And I answered her in Hmong. And then these boys got up. And they were loud. But I tried just to continue, And then they said, if you want to speak that language, go home. And I could see the teachers getting up from the back of the auditorium and walking towards these tall boys, And I said, no, go back. That's why you had me come. That's why you had me come. I fought to belong to America like I never fought in my life. I don't remember what I said. I remember that at the end of it, there was a long line, 400 or 500 young people waiting to give me hugs. You know? But I remember getting back on the plane and feeling for the first time in my life so depleted. You know, when my body gets tired, I take NyQuil, and tomorrow everything is soft and mellow, and we're good to go. When my brain gets tired, I talk to an intelligent person, I read a good book, and I'm ready to go. The exhaustion of the human heart, that is so hard to fight. But I think that was one of the fights that was worth having. I think that was one of the best, most honorable fights in my life. And that memory carries me on. Right? So teacher, public speaker, writer. I have a new essay coming out in a new book from Minnesota Historical Society Press. It's about race in Minnesota. I'm proud of that essay. I'm proud to be a voice that people are beginning to call on and to look to speak to certain issues. You know? It's hard work and there's responsibility, but we cannot be at our, how do we learn to be responsible human beings if we won't take responsibility for those beyond ourselves, right? And so I'm learning there. Every time I learn, I'm happy. Every time I learn, I hurt a little bit. Every time I learn, I grow some. I have grown so much, I think, and sitting behind you is Melissa, who saw me early on. You know, I think I've grown a lot, and so many have seen me in the process, because it's now more public than ever, because I have Facebook. People know what I look like on a Saturday. They know what I look like here and there and everywhere, you know, because recordings, there are records of me all along the way. It's been a phenomenal life already, and I'm only 35. I've been to more places than I ever imagined, met more people than I ever knew how to conceive of. I've been welcomed in more ways than I ever knew how was possible. And I have so many more years ahead of me. So it's been lovely. I can say that when I first graduated from Carleton College, I won this award, and they said, "What do you want to be?" And I said, I didn't know what to say, so I said, "I want to be a writer of the things that matter." I think for the last years of my life, I've tried to live each and every day in a way that matters. And that's right, that's a problem in America, the bigger problem. So many people don't know why they matter, how they matter. They are not sure how to matter. And for the last few years, that's the one question that's been guiding me. My grandma always said that life is nothing more than moments drawn on the thread of time, that it is impossible for any one human being to give our all to all of life, because life is too big. But if you give your all to one moment, you open up the possibility for the next. She said that eventually all of us will sit by some window somewhere, that our favorite foods will be memories, that the people who we love will be gone, and that it will be our memories who are our friends. I want to make memories that are my friends, not my enemies. I want to live a life that is worth remembering, that I'm not dying to forget. So these things guide me. You all can see, you don't have to ask that many questions to get to 80. Okay. Yes, Melissa?
So how did you respond to the young men who wanted you to speak English?
I think I've for the last 5 years, I've lived my life, each and every talk responding. I bring my language to the spaces that I enter, places that normally Hmong people wouldn't get to enter so freely, with so much power in their hand. I bring my language with me. I bring my love of Hmong people. I bring my love of all people with me. And then when I look at people, I just want to remind myself, to remind those around me, that America is nothing more than a piece of land. You're looking at me and I'm looking at you, and we're Americans only because I see that you and I, who stand on the same place, to be the same people. I respond to that young man each and every single day. I walk the streets and I don't give up hope, because somewhere in America, a young black man, a young man of color was killed unnecessarily. This is a funny example, and it's one example will get to the heart of your question. I like football. The Vikings never do well, but I like football. When my husband and I, we were living in Sword, Minneapolis, one of the most progressive neighborhoods in the city, right? And very beautiful. There's a walking avenue for 2 blocks in the summertime when the flowers are blooming and the trees are holding their leaves. It looks like you're walking through a novel if you're walking through it, right? Windows are open. You're somewhere out of time. It's magical. But one night we went to watch a football game in a bowling alley, memory lane of all lanes. We were there, and I went to the bathroom. Single stall. So I go to the bathroom and I hear people coming in. So I rush, to get out so they can use the bathroom. I get out and there are two white women, and they look me up and they look me down. And then they both walked out. They didn't use the bathroom. I'm washing my hands and I'm looking at myself. And I come back and I think, okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. And I sit with my husband. And these women, they return to a table full of people and they're all looking at me and they're all talking. And they're laughing and they just keep looking. And my tears are going to fall, but I'm not going to cry in front of them. So I said, we have to go, Erin, we have to leave. And we walk back. It was a cold night. We walked back and he was so quiet, he didn't know how to respond. This white man who loves me, this white man who I love, he didn't have the words to comfort me. And if my brother were there, he would tell me, haters are going to hate, let it roll down your back. My brother-in-law said, what are you doing there? What are you doing there in the first place, right? But we're walking back and I feel so lonely and so alone. So alone. I fight so hard for a vision of a better America. I don't fight for myself, I fight for a deeper understanding. If all of you walk outside those exit doors today with more understanding in your heart, doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with me, then I've already succeeded. What you see before you is a young American throwing her heart out into the room, believing that you will catch it before it falls on the floor, before you walk all over it each and every time. That's the courage it takes. I did not say anything that night to those women. I walked away from that experience, realizing how much I love this country, how much I would fight, how much I will fight, how much I fight to belong. So I answer those boys in 1,000 different ways, on 1,000 different days. But that's how human experience works. That's how words affect each other, That one paper that your teacher, your high school teacher gave you an F on, I'm sure you're still talking to that teacher. Every time you go to your computers to generate that next paper that you have to for a different professor. That's how it works. That A that last professor gave you, that A, the memory, the conversation there is guiding you as you go along. We don't let each other pass by as easily as we want to think. We don't. And if I don't answer your questions, it's up to you to ask it in a different way so I can try again from a different place, okay? It's how teaching works. Cannot be the engine of the learning that you need to do. Cannot respond to your curiosities with care if you don't give voice to them. So I need you all to talk to me, okay? Yes, right there.
So a lot of us here are future educators, and especially for me, reading the Latehomecomer, the parts about your experiences in the St. Paul School District really resonated with me. And so, as future educators, what cross-cultural measures can we use to welcome Hmong students and any other students that are refugees in the most aware and caring way possible in our classrooms?
It's a really, really good question. I'll answer it this way. The best teachers push for our students' greatest possibilities. We don't set their limits, okay? You cannot get to know somebody without asking questions. Nobody has all the answers. I think the thing that was most exhausting to me as a student, okay, as a young student, was everybody was teaching us everything all the time. People were teaching us how to put seatbelts on, how to flush the toilet. They were teaching my mom and dad how to put mayonnaise on sandwiches, with pieces of meat to give to us as food. Everywhere we went, people were always teaching. Nowhere along the way was there an understanding that there were things that we had to teach in return. My dad, this is a story, but I think it's at the heart of my response to your question. We lived in Andover for a time. In Andover, weird laws governing when you can water your grass and things like that. But there are these tall trees, and I know a few people are nodding, so you're from Andover too, or close to it. But there are these tall trees, and then the city said we had to cut them down. We didn't have any money. So my dad said he was going to go cut them down himself, but my dad didn't have a tall enough ladder. He had 2 short ladders. So what he was going to do is he's going to set up one ladder against the tree, carry one on his back, right? Climb up that ladder, untie the one from his back, tie it to the tree, climb up that ladder, and cut down the tree limbs one at a time. And I'm looking at my dad, who's like a heavy-set older man, and I said, Dad, I think that's illegal. And my dad said, if you're so worried about legalities, you go stand by the side of the road and tell me when the cops are coming. My brother-in-law says to my dad, let me climb, because when I fall, my bones will heal faster. My dad says, if you intend to fall, you're not going up. And so I'm by that side of the road, everybody's looking. My dad sets up one ladder against the tree, climbs up that ladder, unties one from his back, ties it to the tree, climbs up that ladder and cuts down the tree limbs, one at a time. When he runs down, I'm impressed, so I run to him, I said, Dad, that was amazing. He looked at me and he said, there's nothing amazing about what I've just done. He says, all over Southeast Asia, people cut down trees that way. You can't because you never learned how to do the knots. But he goes, that's the failure of the American education system. It taught you that there was only one way to do something. If you learn how to ask your teachers, is there another way to think about this? If your teachers had learned to ask you, is there another way to do this? You could have exploded the classroom walls and wrote the world right in. So much of the job of teaching, right? Knowledge changes. When I was still a student, we were taught that matter could not be created or destroyed. My brothers and sisters are now taught that with massive amounts of energy, you can create small bits of matter. The only thing that doesn't change is the human heart. This heart, right, that gets up Monday to Friday, even if you don't feel like it. And you stand in front of young people, and you stand there to say that we've learned something, that all of humanity hasn't just been for naught. We've learned something that could be useful for the lifetime work you need to do. Questions are the answer. And I think for me personally, just being transparent, right? I tell my students, I'm not very good at math, I'm not very good at technology. If I'm gonna have to, use all this stuff, you gotta give me 5 extra minutes, right? I'm not very tall, so I have people that then you're gonna have to help me. I think letting your students help you teach is the key to good teaching. It's less exhausting. Everybody feels like a success when something happens, when something works, And then just sharing responsibility. It's too much for any one human being to hold the responsibility for education. Education is such a big, broad thing, But I will say this. My grandma said it in a different way. She says, every time you have the power to help, you have the ability to hurt. Knowing that to be true. If you feel that you have nothing to learn from a young person, then you have nothing to teach them. And so when a student walks into the room, how do you welcome them? How do you welcome yourself into that relationship? That's going to be most useful and most beneficial. Remember, you have nothing to teach if you have nothing to learn. What's the time, Panda? 7:50. I have 10 more minutes. I'll close up by doing a reading. This one is about education, and it's from the new book, so it's relevant to your question. I think relevant for lots of us in this room. So this is from a tract, and they're called tracts because my father's a song poet in the Hmong tradition. When we first got to America, he put out an album of song poetry in the Hmong community. He made $5,000, which is a great seller, And the goal was always that he would use the $5,000 to come up with a different album. But he never got to because Doug and I needed new jackets for the school year, and then the other kids were born and they needed new backpacks, new boots on our feet. We wanted rice on the table and chicken drumsticks in our hands. So the $5,000 disappeared, and we never asked my father about the second album that was supposed to come out. And it wasn't until I became a writer, and there was somebody from PBS who was doing a special on me, and they wanted to know, they asked my father, how is it to give birth to a writer when you're one yourself? And my father said, I can barely write my own name. That I remember that there was this album that he was going to put out. So this book, The Song Poet, is my way of writing into life that album that never came, from this life that he lived. But this is from a tract called Doctors and Lawyers. You all know that so many of your parents want you to be doctors and lawyers, right? But this is from them. It was a weekend. The day was bright with autumn sunshine, but the weather had started getting colder. The leaves on the big tree in our front yard were turning away from the green of summer. While it looked like the color was being sapped from some of them, others turned fierce yellow and orange. There were leaves that had begun to resemble ripened apricots hanging off the old branches of the aspen trees along the highways. Other leaves on other trees turned pink like budding roses in springtime. Many of the oak leaves began browning around the edges, crinkling up dry as burned paper. In the mornings when I walked to the bus stop, white clouds of moisture rose up from my nose and mouth. It impressed me how warm and wet my breath was, and how moist the core of me must be. On this day, the family was together inside the house. Dao, Zhu, Thu, and I were reading by the front window, lying on our bellies with books in front of us, sitting down with books in our laps. Shal and Taylor, too young to do homework, sat in front of the television, watching an NSYNC music video that Dao had gotten them, singing along to each of the songs. Occasionally getting up and swaying left to right, left to right. Dao and I both had books in our hands, but we weren't reading them. Instead, we were talking about a fishing trip we wanted to take to Lake Red Rock in Iowa in the spring. Other Hmong families had gone and they returned with stories of how anyone could catch fish there. Friends and relatives talked about white bass that leaped at empty hooks. Our mother and father sat close to the younger girls on the sofa talking to each other. Our father had taught us how to fish at a young age. When we first came to America, it was what the more established relatives took the newcomers to do in the summers for fun. Before we could afford fishing poles, we'd fish with empty soda cans. We wrapped fishing line carefully around the body of the can, tied on floaters and hooks at the ends, and cast our lines by gently flicking our wrists toward the lakes. While the cans were no good for sizable fish, they worked tremendously well for the little sunnies and bluegills we caught at Como and Phelan lakes. Our father had taught us about fishing as our uncles had taught their sons. By the time Doe and I went to junior high, our father had gotten us fishing poles, and we were quick and efficient at stringing them, securing bobbers, sinkers, and hooks. We felt no qualms about hooking wriggly worms or slippery minnows to the ends of our fishing lines. At the beginning of each school year, our father promised us fishing trips in the summer if we got good grades. Doe always got good grades. I declined. We knew that doctors and lawyers were not made overnight, and so it was that we went from one year to the next, dreaming of the fishing trips we would take. That autumn day, Doe and I were loud in our talk of fishing. The house was full of the comfortable chatter of a big family in close proximity. The scent of jasmine rice from the rice cooker lingered in the air and created steam on the window panes. The windows made the bright world outside fuzzy with light. The electric flame of the heating unit in the living room licked at the air with its blue tongue. Our mother and father were talking about a Hmong woman they knew who was dating a white man. The white man and the Hmong woman had gotten into a fight, and he had beaten her up badly. Our parents were so engrossed in their conversation that they did not notice when Doe and I grew quiet in our talk and started focusing on theirs. Our father said that the woman should have never been with the man in the first place. It was dangerous to cross cultures and to pit a Hmong woman's small fist against that of a much larger white man's. I thought the conversation was interesting. Doe did not. Doe's book closed. She slammed it against the carpet. I watched as she got up and moved toward our parents. She pointed a finger at our father's face. She said, "Racist." Our father slapped Doe. The sound of flesh on flesh hung in the air. The force of his hand turned her head. In the seconds it took for Doe to turn her head back toward him, my mother was in between them. Our mother and father hardly ever resorted to physical punishment. When it happened, it was restricted to the occasional rubber band across the butt, and usually only when one child had purposely done something hurtful to another or something dangerous to themselves after a series of verbal warnings. There was a process in our family. We gathered as witnesses. There was a conversation. A parent asked, "What part of you do you want the rubber band to hit? Do you know why I'm using the rubber band? Are you going to do that again?" This time, there were no rules of engagement. Doe and I had stopped getting punished for our actions years ago. We were part of the adult world. We interpreted for our mother and father. We took care of the children. We had access to their bank accounts. We bought groceries. No one expected Doe to respond so fast to a conversation we were not part of. No one expected our father to respond so painfully to those voices breaking into our parents' talk. Before this point, education had always been a path full of light, the direct road to becoming doctors and lawyers. In the past, we had shared things we learned with our mother and father: Christopher Columbus, slavery, the Civil War, affirmative action. It had all made sense. The American story that we were entering, the place we were in. Never before, though, had the lessons in school penetrated so deeply and applied so emotionally in our home. The problem of education had entered our lives. Uncle Jude had not talked about it. Uncle Hu had said nothing about it when his brothers had told the story of his academic success. No one had told us that education could change the way you felt about the world and the people in it, that it could give you words to use and actions to take, not in support of those who love you, but as a response to them. That education in America would make our father and mother less educated in our eyes. Even then, I recognized my father's actions for what it was. It wasn't an effort to discipline. It was an immediate reflex, an instinctual response to Doe's finger in his face, her one word and all that it implied. You are ignorant, uneducated, and wrong. That is from the song poet. Thank you so much for being here.